Happy Friday. Hope everyone has had a great week. Look like a who with my hair up in the back, but that's fine. We are continuing to read through the Necronomicon. We are on the final story, which is The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. And I don't remember where we were. But like always, I will reread part. Okay, so he had just got escorted through with the cats. Right. Okay, the cats. And then just a chunk of where we were yesterday to pick off. So in the midst of a pleasant and playful regiment, relaxed after the successful performance of its duty, Randolph Carter walked with dignity through that enchanted and phosphorescent wood of Titan trees, talking of his quest with the old general and his grandson, whilst others of the band indulged in fantastic gambols or chased fallen leaves that the wind drove among the fungi of that primeval floor. And the old cat said that he had heard much of unknown Kadath in the cold waste, but did not know where it was. As for the marvelous Sunset City, he had not even heard of that, but would gladly relate to Carter anything he might later learn. He gave the seeker some passwords of great value among the cats of Dreamland, and commended him especially to the old chief of the cats in Celophius, whither he was bound. That old cat, already slightly known to Carter, was a dignified Maltese, and would prove highly influential in any transaction. It was dawn when they came to the proper edge of the wood, and Carter bade his friends a reluctant farewell. The young sub-lieutenant he had met, as a small kitten, would have followed him, had not the old general forbidden it, but that austere patriarch insisted that the path of duty lay with the tribe in the army. So Carter set out alone over the golden fields that stretched mysterious beside a willow-fringed river, and the cats went back into the wood. Well did the traveller know those garden lands that lie betwixt the wood of the Serenarian Sea, and blithely did he follow the singing river Okranos that marked his course. The sun rose higher over gentle slopes of grove and lawn, and heightened the colors of the 1,000 flowers that starred each knoll and dingle. A blessed haze lies upon all this region, wherein is held a little more of the sunlight than other places hold, and a little more of the summer's humming music of birds and bees, so that men walk through it as through a fairy place, and feel greater joy and wonder that they ever afterward remember. Feel greater joy and wonder than ever after they ever remember. By noon, Carter reached the jasper terraces of Quran, which slope down to the river's edge and bear that temple of loveliness, wherein the king of Ilek-Vad comes from his far realm on the twilight sea once a year in the golden palanquin to pray to the god of Okranos, who sang to him in youth when he dwelt in a cottage by its banks. All of jasper is that temple, and covering an acre of ground with its walls and courts, its 7 pinnacled towers, and its inner shire where the river enters through hidden channels and the gods sing softly in the night. Many times the moon hears strange music as it shines on those courts and terraces and pinnacles, but whether that music be the song of the god or the chant of the cryptical priests, none but the king of Ilek-Vad may say, for only he had entered the temple or seen the priests. Now, in the drowsiness of day, the carven, delicate fane was silent, and Carter heard only the murmur of the great stream and the hum of their birds and bees as he walked onward under an enchanted sun. All that afternoon, the pilgrim wandered on through perfumed meadows and in the lee of gentle riverward hills, bearing peaceful thatched cottages and the shrines of amiable gods carven from jasper or chrysoberyl. Sometimes he walked close to the bank of Okranos and whistled to the sprightly and iridescent fish of that crystal stream, and at other times he paused amidst the whispering rushes and gazed at the great dark wood on the further side, whose trees came down clear to the water's edge. In former dreams he had seen quaint lumbering boopoths come shyly out of that wood to drink, but now he could not glimpse any. Once in a while he paused to watch a carnivorous fish catching a fish Once in a while he paused to watch a carnivorous fish catch a fishing bird, which it lured to the water by showing its tempting scales in the sun, and grasped by the beak with its enormous mouth as the winged hunter sought to dart down upon it. Toward evening, he mounted a low, grassy rise and saw before him, flaming in the sunset, the thousand gilded spires of Thran. Lofty beyond belief are the alabaster walls of that incredible city, sloping inward toward the top and wrought in one solid piece by what means no man knows, for they are more ancient than memory. Yet lofty as they are with their 100 gates and 200 turrets, the cluster towers within, all white beneath their golden spires, are loftier still, so that men on the plain around see them soaring into the sky, sometimes shining clear, sometimes caught at the top in tangles of cloud and mist, and sometimes clouded lower down with their utmost pinnacles blazing free above the vapors. And where Thran's gates open on the river are great wharves of marble, with ornate galleons of fragrant cedar, and Calamander riding gently at anchor, and strange bearded sailors sitting on casks and bales with the hieroglyphs of far places. Landward beyond the walls lies the farm country, where small white cottages dream between little hills, and narrow roads with many stone bridges wind gracefully among streams and gardens. What is this? Currently on a 5-stream kick. That's so fun. Down through this verdant land Carter walked at evening, and saw twilight float up from the river to the marvelous golden spires of Thran. And just at the hour of dusk he came to the southern gate, and was stopped by a red-robed sentry, till he had told 3 dreams beyond belief, and proved himself a dreamer worthy to walk up Thran's steep, mysterious streets, and linger in the bazaars where the wares of the ornate galleons were sold. And into that incredible city he walked, through a wall so thick that the gate was a tunnel, and thereafter amidst curved and undulate ways winding deep and narrow between the heavenward towers. Lights shone through grated and balconied windows, and the sound of lutes and pipes stole timid from inner courts where marble fountains bubbled. Carter knew his way, and edged down through darker streets to the river, where at an old sea tavern he found the captains and seamen he had known in myriad other dreams. There he bought his passage to Celiphias on a great green galleon, and there he stopped for the night, after speaking gravely to the venerable cat of the inn, who blinked dozing before an enormous hearth and dreamed of old wars and forgotten gods. In the morning, Carter boarded the galleon bound for Celiphias, and sat in the prow as the ropes were cast off, and the long sail down to the Serenarian Sea begun. For many leagues the banks were much as they were above Thran, with now and then a curious temple rising on the further hills toward the right, and a drowsy village on the shore, with steep red roofs and nets spread in the sun. Mindful of his search, Carter questioned all the mariners closely about those whom they had met in the taverns of Celiphias, asking the names and ways of the strange men with long, narrow eyes, long-lobed ears, thin noses, and pointed chins, who came in dark ships from the north and traded onyx for the carved jade and spun gold and little red singing birds of Celiphias. Of these men the sailors knew not much, save that they talked seldom and spread a kind of awe about them. Their land, very far away, was called Inganok, and not many people cared to go thither, because it was cold, twilight land, and said to be close to unpleasant Leng, although high impassable mountains towered on either side where Leng was thought to lie, so that none might say whether this evil plateau, with its horrible stone villages and unmentionable monastery, were really there, or whether the rumor were only a fear that timid people felt in the night, when those formidable barrier peaks loomed black against a rising moon. Certainly, men reached Leng from very different oceans. Of other boundaries of Inganok the sailors had no notion, nor had they heard of the cold waste and unknown Kadath save from a vague, unplaced report. And of the marvelous sunset city which Carter sought, they knew nothing at all. So the traveler asked no more of far things, but bided his time till he might talk with those strange men from cold and twilight Inganok, who are the seed of such gods as carved their features on the granite. Late in the day, the galleon reached those bends of the river which traverse the perfumed jungles of Cled. Here Carter wished he might disembark, for in those tropic tangles sleep wondrous palaces of ivory, lone and unbroken, where once dwelt fabulous monarchs of a land whose name is forgotten. Spells of the Elder Ones keep those places unharmed and undecayed, for it is written that there may one day be need of them again, and elephant caravans have glimpsed them from afar by moonlight, though none dares approach them closely because of the guardians to which their wholeness is due. But the ship swept on, and dusk hushed the hum of day, and the first stars above blinked answers to the early fireflies on the banks as that jungle fell far behind, leaving only its fragrance as a memory that had been. And all through the night that galleon floated on past mysteries unseen and unsuspected. Once a lookout reported fires on the hills to the east, but the sleepy captain said they had better not be looked at too much, since it was highly uncertain just who or what had lit them. In the morning, the river had broadened out greatly, and Carter saw by the houses along the banks that they were close to the vast trading city of Llaneth on the Serenarian Sea. Here the walls are of a rugged granite, and the houses peaked fantastic with beams and plastered gables. The men of Llaneth are more like those of the waking world than any others in dreamland, so that the city is not sought except for barter, but is prized for the solid work of its artisans. The wharves of Llaneth are of oak, and there the galleon made fast while the captain traded in the taverns. Carter also went ashore and looked curiously upon the rutted streets where wooden ox carts lumbered, and feverish merchants cried their wares vacuously in the bazaars. The sea taverns were all close to the wharves on cobbled lanes salt with the spray of high tides, and seemed exceedingly ancient with their low, black-beamed ceilings and casements of greenish bull's-eye panes. Ancient sailors in those taverns talked much of distant ports, and told many stories of the curious men from Twilight Ingannock, and had little to add to what the seamen of the galleon had told. Then at last, after much unloading and loading, the ship set sail once more over the sunset sea, and the high walls and gables of Llaneth grew less as the last golden light of day lent them a wonder and beauty beyond any that men had given them. 2 nights and 2 days the galleon sailed over the Serenarian Sea, sighting no land and speaking with none but one other vessel. Then near sunset of the 2nd day, there loomed up ahead the snowy peak of Iran, with its ginkgo trees swaying on the lower slope, and Carter knew that they were come to the land of Uth-Nargai and the marvelous city of Seliphias. Swiftly there came into sight the glittering minarets of that fabulous town, and the untarnished marble walls with their bronze statues, and the great stone bridge where Naraxa joins the sea. Then rose the gentle hills behind the town with their groves and gardens of asphodels, and the small shrines and cottages upon them, and far in the background the purple ridge of the Tanarians, potent and mystical, behind which lay forbidden ways into the waking world and toward other regions of dream. The harbor was full of painted galleys, some of which were from the marble cloud city of Serenian that lies in ethereal space beyond where the sea meets the sky, and some of which were from more substantial parts of dreamland. Among these, the steersman threaded his way up to the spice-fragrant wharves, where the galleon made fast in the dusk as the city's million lights began to twinkle out over the water. Ever new seemed this deathless city of vision, for here time has no power to tarnish or destroy. As it has always been, is still the turquoise of Nath-Horthath, and the 80 orchid-wreathed priests are the same who builded it 10,000 years ago. Shining still is the bronze of the great gates, nor are the onyx pavements ever worn or broken, and the great bronze statues on the walls look down on merchants and camel drivers other than fable, yet without one gray hair in their forked beards. Carter did not at once seek out the temple or the palace or the citadel, but stayed by the seaward wall among traders and sailors. And when it was too late for rumors and legends, he sought out an ancient tavern he knew well, and rested with dreams of the gods on unknown Kadath whom he sought. The next day, he searched all along the quays for some of the strange mariners of Ingannock, but was told that none were now in port, their galley not being due from the north for full 2 weeks. He found, however, one Thorabonian sailor who had been to Inganoch and had worked in the onyx quarries of that twilit place. And this sailor said there was certainly a descent to the north of the peopled region, which everybody seemed to fear and shun. The Thorabonian opined that this desert land around the utmost rim of impassable peaks into Leng's horrible plateau, and that this was why men feared it, though he admitted that there were other vague tales of evil presences and nameless sentinels. Whether or not this could be the fabled waste wherein unknown Kadath stands, he did not know, but it seemed unlikely that those presences and sentinels, if indeed they existed, were stationed for naught. On the following day, Carter walked up the Street of the Pillars to the Turquoise Temple and talked with the high priest. Though Nathorthath is chiefly worshipped in Selaphius, all the great ones are mentioned in diurnal prayers, and the priest was reasonably versed in their moods. Like a tall and distant Ulthar, he strongly advised against any attempts to see them, declaring that they are testy and capricious, and subject to strange protection from the mindless other gods from outside, whose soul and messenger is the crawling chaos Nyarlathotep. Their jealous hiding of the marvelous Sunset City showed clearly that they did not wish Carter to reach it, and it was doubtful how they would regard a guest whose object was to see them and plead before them. No man had ever found Kadath in the past, and it might be just as well if none ever found it in the future. Such rumors as were told about that onyx castle of the Great Ones were not by any means reassuring. You should compile and upload as an audiobook on YouTube. I should. That's a really good idea. Right now I just have them all in different parts on YouTube, but that's a really good idea to just put it all in one. And it has been on my radar. I would love to do that. Such rumors as were told about that onyx castle of the Great Ones were not by any means reassuring. Having thanked the orchid-crowned high priest, Carter left the temple and sought out the bazaar of the sheep butchers, where the old chief of Selaphius's cats dwelt sleek and contented. That grey and dignified being was sunning himself on the onyx pavement and extended a languid paw as his caller approached. But when Carter repeated the passwords and introductions furnished him by the old cat general of Ulthar, the furry patriarch became very cordial and communicative, and told much of the secret lore known to cats on the seaward slopes of Uth-Nargai. Best of all, he repeated several things told him furtively by the timid waterfront cats of Selaphius about the men of Inganoch, on whose dark ships no cat will go. It seems that these men have an aura not of earth about them, though that is not the reason why no cat will sail on their ships. The reason for this is that Inganoch holds shadows which no cat can endure, so that in all that cold twilight realm there is never a cheering purr or a homely mew. Whether it be because of things wafted over the impassable peaks from hypothetical Leng, or because of things filtering down from the chilly desert to the north, none may say. But it remains a fact that in that far land there broods a hint of outer space which cats do not like, and to which they are more sensitive than men. Therefore, they will not go on the dark ships that seek the basalt keys of Inganoch. The old chiefs of the cats also told him where to find his friend King Kuranes. In Carter's latter dreams had reigned alternatively in the rose crystal palace of the 70 delights at Selaphius, and in the turreted cloud castle of sky-floating Serenian. It seemed that he could no more find content in those places, but had formed a mighty longing for the English cliffs and downlands of his boyhood, where in little dreaming villages England's old songs hover at evening behind lattice windows, and where grey church towers peep lovely through the verdure of distant valleys. He could not go back to these things in the waking world because his body was dead, but he had done the next best thing and dreamed a small tract of such countryside in the region east of the city, where meadows roll gracefully up from the sea cliffs to the foot of the Tenarian hills. There he dwelt in a grey Gothic manor house of stone, looking on the sea, and tried to think it was ancient Trevor Towers, where he was born and where 13 generations of his forefathers had first seen the light. And on the coast nearby he had built a little Cornish fishing village with steep cobbled ways, settling therein such people as had the most English faces, and seeking ever to teach them the dear-remembered accents of old Cornwall fishers. And in a valley not far off, he had reared a great Norman abbey, whose tower he could see from his window, placing around it in the churchyard grey stones with the names of his ancestors carved thereon, and with a moss somewhat like old England's moss. For though Karanis was a monarch in the land of dream, with all imagined pomps and marvels, splendors and beauties, ecstasies and delights, novelties and excitements at his command, he would gladly have resigned forever the whole of his power and luxury and freedom for one blessed day as a simple boy in that pure and quiet England, that ancient, beloved England which had molded his being and of which he must always be immutably a part. So when Carter bade that old grey chief of the cats adieu, he did not seek the terraced palace of rose crystal, but walked out the eastern gate and across the daisied fields towards a peaked gable, which he glimpsed through the oaks of a park sloping up to the sea cliffs. And in time he came to a great hedge and a gate with a little brick lodge, and when he rang the bell, there hobbled to admit him no robed and anointed lackey of the palace, but a small, stubby old man in a smock, who spoke as best he could in the quaint tones of far Cornwall. And Carter walked up the shady path between trees as near as possible to England's trees, and climbed the terraces among gardens set out as in Queen Anne's time. At the door, flanked by stone cats in the old way, he was met by a whiskered butler in suitable livery, and was presently taken to the library, where Karains, Lord of Uthnar-Gai and the sky around Serenian, sat pensive in a chair by the window, looking on his little sea-coast village, and wishing that his old nurse would come in and scold him, because he was not ready for that hateful lawn party at the vicar's, with the carriage waiting and his mother nearly out of patience. Karains, clad in a dressing gown of the sort favoured by London tailors in his youth, rose eagerly to meet his guest, for the sight of an Anglo-Saxon from the waking world was very dear to him, even if it was a Saxon from Boston, Massachusetts, instead of Cornwall. And for long they talked of old times, having much to say because both were old dreamers and well versed in the wonders of incredible places. Karains indeed had been out beyond the stars in the ultimate void, and was said to be the only one who had ever returned sane from such a voyage. At length, Carter brought up the subject of his quest and asked of his host those questions he had asked of so many others. Karains did not know where Kadath was, or the marvelous Sunset City, but he did know that the Great Ones were very dangerous creatures to seek out, and that the other gods had strange ways of protecting them from impertinent curiosity. He had learned much of the other gods in distant parts of space, especially in that region where form does not exist, and colored gases study the innermost secrets. The violet gas Sknak has told him terrible things of the crawling chaos Nyarlathotep, and had warned him never to approach the central void where the demon sultan Azathoth gnaws hungrily in the dark. Altogether, it was not well to meddle with the Elder Ones, and if they persistently denied all access to the marvelous Sunset City, it were better not to seek that city. Karains, furthermore, doubted whether his guest would profit aught by coming to the city, even were he to gain it. He himself had dreamed and yearned long years for lovely Celiphias and the land of Uthnar-Gai, and for the freedom and colour and high experience of life devoid of its chains, conventions, and stupidities. But now that he was come into that city and that land, and was the king thereof, he found the freedom and the vividness all too soon wore out, and monotonous for want of linkage with anything firm in his feelings and memories. He was a king in Uthnar-Gai, but found no meaning therein, and drooped always for the old familiar things of England that had shaped his youth. All his kingdom would he give for the sound of Cornish church bells over the downs, and all the 1,000 minarets of Celiphias for the steep, homely roofs of the village near his home. So he told his guest that the unknown Sunset City might not hold quite that content he sought, and that perhaps it had better remain a glorious and half-remembered dream. For he had visited Carter often in the old waking days, and knew well the lovely New England slopes that had given him birth. At the last, he was very certain, the seeker would long only for the early remembered scenes, the glow of Beacon Hill at evening, the tall steeples and winding hill streets of quaint Kingsport, the hoary gambrel roofs of ancient and witch-haunted Arkham, and the blessed meads and valleys where stone walls rambled and white farmhouse gables peeped out from the bowers of verdure. These things he told Randolph Carter, but still the seeker held to his purpose. And in the end, they parted each with his own conviction, and Carter went back through the bronze gate into Celophaeus and down the street of pillars to the old seawall, where he talked more with the mariners of far ports, and waited for the dark ship from cold and twilight Inganoch, whose strange-faced sailors and onyx traders had in them the blood of the great ones. One starlit evening, when the Pharos shone splendid over the harbor for the longed-for ship put in, and strange-faced sailors and traders appeared one by one and group by group in the ancient taverns along the seawall. It was very exciting to see again those living faces so like the godlike features on Negranic, but Carter did not hasten to speak with the silent seaman. He did not know how much of pride and secrecy and dim supernatural memory might fill those children of the great ones, and was sure it would not be wise to tell them of his quest or ask too closely of that cold desert stretching north of their twilight land. They talked little with the other folk in those ancient sea taverns, but would gather in groups in remote corners and sing amongst themselves the haunting airs of unknown places, or chant long tales to one another in accents alien to the rest of dreamland. And so rare and moving were those airs and tales that one might guess their wonders from the faces of those who listened, even though the words came to common ears only a strange cadence and obscure melody. For a week the strange seamen lingered in the taverns and traded in the bazaars of Celophaeus, and before they fled, Carter had taken passage on their dark ship, telling them that he was an old onyx miner and wished to work in their quarries. That ship was very lovely and cunningly wrought, being of teakwood with ebony fittings and traceries of gold, and the cabin in which the traveler lodged had hangings of silk and velvet. One morning, at the turn of the tide, the sails were raised and the anchor lifted, and as Carter stood on the high stern, he saw the sunrise blazing walls and bronze statues and golden minarets of ageless Celophaeus sink into the distance, and the snowy peaks of Mount Iran grow smaller and smaller. By noon, there was nothing in sight save the gentle blue of the Serenarian Sea, with one painted galley afar off bound for that realm of Serenian, where the sea meets the sky. And night came with gorgeous stars, and the dark ship steered for Charles's Wain and the Little Bear as they swung slowly round the pole. And the sailors sang strange songs of unknown places, and they stole off one by one to the forecastle, while the wistful watchers murmured old chants and leaned over the rail to glimpse the luminous fish playing in bowers beneath the sea. Carter went to sleep at midnight and rose in the glow of a young morning, marking that the sun seemed further south than was its wont. And all through that second day he made progress in knowing the men of the ship, getting them, little by little, to talk of their cold twilight land, of their exquisite onyx city, and of their fear of the high and impassable peaks beyond which Lang was said to be. They told him how sorry they were that no cats would stay in the land of Inganoch, and how they thought the hidden nearness of Lang was to blame for it. Only of the stony desert to the north they would not talk. There was something disquieting about that desert, and it was thought expedient not to admit its existence. On later days, they talked of the quarries in which Carter said he was going to work. There were many of them, for all the city of Inganoch was builded of onyx, whilst great polished blocks of it were traded in Renar, Ogrothan, and Celophaeus, and at home with the merchants of Thra, Ilarnak, and Kadath for the beautiful wares of those fabulous ports. And far to the north, almost in the cold desert whose existence the men of Inganoch did not care to admit, there was an unused quarry greater than all the rest, from which had been hewn in forgotten times such prodigious lumps and blocks that the sight of their chiseled vacancies struck terror to all who beheld. Who had mined those incredible blocks, and whither they had been transported, no man might say, but it was thought best not to trouble that quarry, around which such inhuman memories might conceivably cling. So it was left all alone in the twilight, with only the raven and the rumored shantak bird to brood on its immensities. When Carter heard of this quarry, he was moved to deep thought, for he knew from old tales that the Great One's castle atop unknown Kadath is of onyx. Each day the sun wheeled lower and lower in the sky, and the mists overhead grew thicker and thicker. And in 2 weeks there was not any sunlight at all, but only a weird grey twilight shining through a dome of eternal cloud by day, and a cold, starless phosphorescence from the underside of that cloud by night. On the 20th day, a great jagged rock in the sea was sighted from afar, and the first land glimpsed since Iran's snowy peak had dwindled behind the ship. Carter asked the captain the name of that rock, but was told that it had no name and had never been sought by any vessel because of the sounds that came from it at night. And when, after dark, a dull and ceaseless howling arose from that jagged granite place, the traveler was glad that no stop had been made and that the rock had no name. The seaman prayed and chanted till the noise was out of earshot, and Carter dreamed terrible dreams within dreams in the small hours. And I think that is as good a place to stop as any. So that's all for today. I will upload this on YouTube. It's the same name as this channel, K.A. Reads Classics. The rest of this is up there. The rest of the Necronomicon is up there, except for one story, because I remember just now there was one that I read and it was so shit that I just decided not to upload it. Hi. Yes, I made a bunch of little custom emotes, so please use them. I think they're super fun. And I will see you guys tomorrow. So thank you for reading with me, and I hope everyone has a great Friday. Bye.